You're looking at a 1999 town car. It only has about 150,000 miles on it. It does have the 4.6 V8 in it, but what it has started to do is rattle. Now, the rattling to me, to my ear, is clearly a timing chain rattle. I tried to record it, but I just could not pick it up with my microphones to share it with you guys. But it basically sounds like a chain on a roller coaster when you're going up a hill. You can clearly tell it's a chain rattle. We need to find out what is rattling, what the problem is, and resolve this before it becomes a major issue. Now, I know these cars have some tensioner issues. They also have some timing chain guide issues, and we just need to get in there, take a look, and see what's causing these issues before we go any further. Now, the purpose of this video is to show you step by step how to remove that timing chain cover so you can troubleshoot your issues, and the procedures should be relatively similar to any 4.6 overhead cam design. Now, the first thing you need to do is disconnect the battery, and the second thing you're going to have to do is drain the radiator fluid, and the reason for that is you do have to remove the water pump. Now, getting to the timing chain can be relatively difficult, mainly because of all the parts and pieces you have to remove off of the engine. Next, remove any plastic shielding that prevents you from getting to the top, because you're going to want to remove this cowling right here and the fan. This is an electric fan, so we have to get all of this out of our way, and we'll have to remove these hoses, so you're going to want to loosen up all the hose clips and get all of this out of your way. You're going to want to disconnect the hoses from the overflow box. There's one bolt that holds it in. It should lift straight up after that. Disconnect the power feed from the back side of the fan, and then you're going to find two bolts located here and here that hold the cowling on. Once those two bolts are removed, you can lift the entire cowling straight up. Now, a fast tip is put the bolts back into the place where they came from so you don't lose them, and that way you know which bolt goes where. We're going to remove the nuts and bolts that are holding the power steering reservoir on. We are going to leave the hoses attached, but this will allow us to pull it away from the engine. On this side, we have some air conditioning components. We need to get this plug off. There's one nut that holds all of this stuff to the front, and once we pull that nut off, it'll give us some more room to work inside here. We can back it away from the engine. After removing the bolt, I was able to rotate it just a little bit away. I didn't want to work with it too much because I really don't want to compromise the air conditioner any. I'm going to try to leave it here and see if I can work around it. Hopefully we don't have to remove this. As I mentioned before, the water pump has to be removed, and now's a good time to break these bolts loose because the belt's still on it, and now to kind of hold this still so we can break those loose. After you have those four bolts loose, you can go ahead and take a breaker bar and go ahead and release the tensioner and pull the belt off. Now that the belt's off, go ahead and remove the pulley from the water pump, and you're going to have to remove the crank pulley. Best way to do this is take an impact and back this nut off, and you're going to need some type of puller to pull the pulley off. This is how I have the puller set up. There are 3 holes in the pulley that are threaded, and if you have a good kit, it'll have all of these bolts, and you shouldn't have any problem. Mine took the small 3 bolts. They fit right in, they snugged up, and basically we just turn this guy with a ratchet, and it will pull the pulley right off. Now I'll put a link down in the description below of this particular kit. The power steering pump needs removed, and that's because it's bolted to the bottom of the timing chain cover. The best way to remove this is from underneath the car. You can get to all 4 bolts, and you can back the bolts out. We're just going to remove the bolts and let it kind of sag down inside the engine compartment. At this point in the game, usually what everybody else does is they remove the water pump. I think I'm going to try to leave the water pump on. They also removed the valve covers because these 2 bolts on the end, they bolt into the timing cover. And across the bottom down here where the oil pan is, there's 4 bolts that also bolt into this timing cover. What I'm going to try to do is to remove this bolt and the 2 bolts over here, the 4 bolts across the bottom, and then there are 4 bolts here and 4 bolts on this side. And then underneath the water pump is some bolts here and here. There might be one underneath it, but you can get to them without pulling the pump off. And there's a bolt here and one here. And hopefully we take those bolts off. Maybe we can shimmy this thing straight back and get a quick peek at what's going on inside this engine before we further start taking things apart. Sure enough, after removing all those bolts, I'm able to take a little pry bar and just kind of pry back on this without any major issues. I'm going to kind of work it off, and we'll take a look inside and see what's going on. So my first initial kind of impression here is the plastic pieces seem to be in way better shape than I expected. Typically when you hear this chain rattling, these little pieces are kind of torn up and there's other problems inside the engine. Now, what my suspicion is if you reach in here and you feel the chain on the passenger side, it's just nice and tight. There's no slop in it. But when you go over here to the driver's side, there's all kinds of slop in this chain. So I bet this is what we were hearing rattling, and my suspicion is this adjuster isn't working properly. So we'll take this apart and see what's going on with it. Maybe it'll be a simple fix. We put another adjuster on it, put it back together, and we go again. But we'll have to do a little more troubleshooting. Until then, this is going to be part 1 of the video. We'll button this video up, get it out there and posted. And if you guys have any ideas, post down below. I'd like to see your comments. Like and subscribe. Take a look at some of my other videos. You might find something you yourself may be interested in.